Okay. It is 6 o'clock, so I will call to order the City of Douglasville's City Council meeting. This is a legislative work session for May the 14th. And I'll go through the protocol again for the meeting. Someone may just be tuning in and did not do the budget hearing, so I'll go through the protocol again so that we'll have everyone be on the same page. I'd like to welcome you to the City of Douglasville's legislative work session. I'm Douglasville's Mayor, Rochelle Robinson. Today's meeting is being conducted in whole or in part by teleconference. Please permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Council members, I will go through our list first. Mayor Pro Tem Terry Miller.
I am here, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Councilmember Chris Watts.
I am here, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councilperson Nicole Miller.
Present.
Thank you. Councilman or Councilwoman Dr. LaShawn Burdanley.
Yes, ma'am, I am here.
Councilman Mark Adams.
Present, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
You're welcome. I switched that up a little bit. Councilman Samuel Davis
Present.
and Councilman Howard Estes.
I am here, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Now we'll move on to staff. When I call your name, please confirm or respond in the affirmative for your name or the office if someone is representing that office or department. Our city manager, Ms. Marcia Hampton.
Present.
Thank you. Assistant City Manager, Ms. Chelsea Jackson.
Present.
Thank you. Our city clerk, Ms. Vicky Acker.
I'm present.
Good. Our city attorney, the attorney's office, Mr. Joel Dotson.
Mr. Dodson's out tonight.
Thank you. Then we'll move on to our chief assistant city attorney, Ms. Susan Littlefield.
I am here, Madam Mayor.
Yes, ma'am. Good to see you. Our police department, our deputy chief, Deputy Sue Ann Shaw.
I'm here, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
You're welcome. From the Human Resources Department, our director, Ms. Tia Austin Bean.
Present, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. Director of Finance, Ms. Karen Cowan.
Present.
Thank you. Our courts administrator, Ms. Angela Cochran.
Present.
Miss Angie, I called you Angela.
I know, everybody does. It's okay.
Everyone does? Well, that's good. Engineering, our project manager, Mr. Marcus Thompson.
Here, Madam Mayor.
Good to hear your voice, Mr. Thompson.
Likewise.
Thank you. Community Relations Director, Mr. Jason Post.
Present, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Post. Our IT manager who's putting all this together, we're giving you hands, clap, 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 Mr. Samuel Jenkins.
We were present here.
Thank you, Brother
Madam Mayor.
Jenkins. Yes, sir. Parks and Recreations Director, Mr. Travis Landrum.
Present, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Keep moving my screen over so I can see everyone. Our Community Development Director, Ms. Patrice Williams.
Present, Madam Mayor.
Good to hear your voice, and let me see if I can see you. Okay. Our Main Street Coordinator, Ms. Brianna Watts.
Present, Madam Mayor.
Good to hear your voice, Ms. Watts. Okay, I don't see faces. They'll keep on moving. Thank you so much for staff responding. And then now we'll move on with our directions and for our open meeting. And this open meeting is a Douglasville Mayor and Council. Let me see if I'm going to do the agenda first, so to have our prayer. I'm having some technical difficulties, but I'll make certain. Yes, our invocation we'll have by Pastor James Harper from First Presbyterian Church of Douglasville. And if you don't mind, after we have our invocation, we'll have our Pledge of Allegiance, and I have a flag, and our Mayor Pro Tem will do the Pledge of Allegiance. So if you don't mind, are you here, Pastor Harper?
I am, Madam Mayor, happily.
Good to hear your voice. I miss you at Rotary. So
yes, I miss you too.
Yes, sir. So after Pastor Harper does the invocation, our Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the Mayor Pro Tem Terry Miller. Please prepare yourselves for the invocation. Pastor Harper.
Thank you. Let's pray. Gracious and loving God, we gather with the humble awareness of the needs that are before us in our community in this world, but also confident in the fact that you are a wise and good God and are well able to provide for us the wisdom and the guidance we need as a community of people to be faithful in what we have and diligent in the ways that we might serve one another. I'm grateful for the staff and thank you for this and the city council, and just grateful for the way that they have so diligently served in these very challenging times. I pray that you would continue to raise up the resources the city needs to do its work. As I was listening to the tail end of the finance committee, I know that there are needs there, God, but we know you want to do good in this community. Just I pray that you would allow there to be a restoration of our economy, that people would find jobs, that those who are sick would be healthy. And we look to the big picture of what's happening in the world around us and are certainly interceding for you to bring about a solution for a vaccine, God, and just a turning of the tables on the battle against COVID-19. May there be a day soon where we might see the end of this challenge and might be able to return to the life that we all enjoy. Until then, make us patient and help us to be fervent and serving well where we can serve and trusting you with the rest. And we pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem, and thank you, Pastor Harper, for that beautiful invocation. We'll move on now with our announcements and presentations, and then we'll go to the committee agenda as it's presented or printed. This is the open meeting of the Douglasville Council. It's being conducted by teleconference consistent with official code of Georgia, annotated section 50-14-1G, due to emergency conditions involving public safety in order to mitigate the transmission of the coronavirus and reduce the risk of COVID-19 illness. That code section, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows local governments to meet by teleconference in the event of emergency, so long as means are afforded for the public to have simultaneous access to the teleconference meeting. For this meeting, we are convening partially by Zoom software as shown on the city's website, describing how the public may join, which is via YouTube media platform. All the elected officials and staff are attending by teleconference, and interested members of the public are attending by live stream via YouTube. Now I'll just give instructions again for the council members and staff. I would ask that you would conduct yourselves with these new criteria that I will go through as we typically do, and by committee members will have the authority, or if they would like to call a roll for each person to answer, or they can open it up and have council members indicate some type of way that they'd like to speak. And so, of course, we do that by committee. So each person will have an opportunity to do that. This is a legislative work session, and we can conduct again by committees. So if you're speaking, council members, please mute your phone until you are permitted to speak and you have the floor, and we'll ask that one person speak at a time, of course. For applicants and other participants from the public, this meeting will allow public comment as well. Even if members of the public do not provide comment, participants are advised that people may be listening who do not provide comments, and listeners are not required to identify themselves. Please note that this meeting is being recorded. Our general instructions is that this is a work session where items are presented for discussion and no official action will be taken tonight. Official action will be taken on these items discussed tonight at another time. If the business any citizen wishes to speak is not listed as an agenda item, there will be ample time under the agenda item comments from citizens and delegates section for you to discuss any other matters related to pending or potential city business. I'd ask that you would keep your comments and presentations on a professional level, dealing with the facts that are important for this governing body to make our decisions. And one person speaking at a time, as I've already said. The agenda items will be handled the following way. The committee chairperson will read the agenda item. Then the person representing the agenda item or applicant will make his or her presentation. And that will be the only opportunity that you have to present. Myself and council members will possibly ask questions from the applicant to help us make our decision before we vote. And after that, the committee chairperson will ask for comments or statements from the audience. And of course, there should have been a form that you would have filled out to speak, and you have to turn that in an hour before the council meeting started. There's a maximum time of 30 minutes for each person, 30 minutes in totality for those in favor, 30 minutes for those in opposition to those items, and each person has 5 minutes to speak. Okay, if you would like to speak, of course, we don't have forms unless you were able to come to City Hall, the conference center, and fill out a form. But if not, then you should have, again, filled it out an hour prior to, with your name, address for the record. Each person has one opportunity to speak. This is not a question or answer debate format. We're just here to receive information. And so Ms. Jackson will permit our assistant city manager to help us with folks who want to make comments. And we do not accept comments that are considered to be offensive, and will ask that you would refrain from doing that. The chairperson will lead each person that is able to speak. So that's a whole lot of talking. And now we'll move on, after we've done our presentations, to the agenda that is printed. And the first committee is Economic Development Committee. That's chaired by Mayor Pro Tem Terry Miller.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have one item of business under the Economic Development Committee, and that is to authorize the mayor to sign a memorandum of understanding with the Georgia Department of Community Affairs to continue the city's participation in the Georgia Classic Main Street program. I understand Brianna Watts has some information for us to share.
Yes, good evening, Mayor and Council. Brianna Watts, Main Street Coordinator for the City of Douglasville, 6701 Church Street, Douglasville, Georgia, 30134. And this is just an MOU that's signed yearly so that we can continue to be a part of the National and Georgia Main Street Association. It is staff's recommendation that you do sign the MOU, as the City of Douglasville has participated in the Main Street Association for about 20 years now and have really made some great strides. So this is just something that we do yearly so that we can still be a part of the organization and use logos and things of that nature.
Thank you, Ms. Watts. I'll go down the line and see if anybody has any questions or comments. Councilman Adams, do you have any questions or comments?
No comment. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilman Estes, do you have any comments or questions?
No comments or questions, Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilman Watts, do you have any questions or comments?
No questions, comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Councilman Davis, any questions or comments?
No, Mayor Pro Tem.
Councilwoman Miller, do you have any questions or comments?
No questions or comments. Thank you.
Councilwoman Danley, any questions or comments?
No questions or comments, Mayor Pro Tem. Thank you.
Mayor Robinson, do you have any questions or comments?
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. I did have a quick question for Ms. Watts. Ms. Brianna, is there a theme this year? Typically, there's a theme every year, and you have like the kids come and all kinds of stuff. So are we opting to not do that, or what's happening with that whole initiative?
There's not yet, as of yet, coming down from the National Main Street Association. Right now, it's just kind of togetherness, sticking together throughout all this. So that's kind of what we're promoting right now. So that's kind of all we're talking about right now.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Seeing that we seem to have no questions or comments, if there are no objections, I'd like to put this item on the consent agenda for next week. So move. That's all I have tonight, Madam Mayor, under the Economic Development Committee.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. We'll move on then to item number 6, which is Finance Committee. That's chaired by Councilmember Mark Adams.
Councilman Adams,
Uh-oh.
you'll have to unmute.
You mute.
I'm sorry. I don't want to be heard tonight. I'm sorry. Have 3 items tonight under finance. Item A, authorize the mayor to sign change order number 2 with Complete Demolition Services Incorporated for the Douglasville Jail demolition project, amending the parties' agreement of August 23rd, 2019 to add a scope of work for additional material removal. Mr. Marcus Thompson is with us tonight, and he's going to give us details concerning that change order. Mr. Thompson?
Marcus Thompson, 6701 Church Street. Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. So change order number 2 request reflects the removal and disposal of the fencing surrounding the jail site, all asphalt, curbs, sidewalks, and miscellaneous slabs per TSW demolition plans that were not included in the original agreement. Also, the change order reflects, well, it includes 200 additional loads of concrete material anticipated to be disposed of as well. The services shown on the change order request are the remaining activities to complete, and the demolition phase expected to take 1 month to finish. Are there any questions?
Mr. Thompson?
Yes.
What is the dollar amount of that amendment, just so that everyone sees and hears that? What is the dollar amount of the cost of that change order?
Yeah, sure. It's approximately $100,000. I'll say around $103,000.
Okay. And that should then basically cause that site to once again be an open field, no improvements, down to the bare dirt, and graded and stabilized as far as silt fencing, or not silt fencing, but stabilization as far as grass. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to open the floor, if you all would just identify yourselves, and let's take it slow so that we can hear from any and everyone that might have a comment. Let's begin as if we are going left to right across the dais. So I'll start with Coach Watts and then just continue down the line. I don't have anyone in particular that I want to call on. So whomever would like to speak, Coach Watts, if you have anything, get us started, please.
I don't really have any questions, Mr. Chairman. Just out of curiosity, and I can't remember why these items wouldn't have been put in the original bid.
Well, in the original request for a proposal, the scope of work basically included demolishing just the footprint of the building and the other additional structures on the site. After that, we got TSW to develop a more detailed demolition plan. So that includes the actual roadways, the parking lots that you will see, the sidewalks, the curb and gutter, etc. So this change order reflects those items.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Thompson. Go ahead.
And Mr. Thompson, thank you, Coach. And Mr. Thompson, if I could break in here just to make sure, these funds that we are, if we agree to go forward with this change order, these funds are already in the budget. This is not something that we'll have to pull from another line item. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Any other comment or question?
Yes, this is Councilwoman Dr. LaShawn Danley, Chairman Adams. I have a question. Do you foresee any large change orders of this amount at this time?
Do you mean? Go ahead, Mr. Thompson.
As far as the demolition phase, no, I don't, ma'am.
All right. Thank you. No other questions.
I have a question, Councilman Davis. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Davis.
Yes, sir. Marcus, would there be any separation if you take down all the fencing from the graveyard for walking out on the property? We don't want them to get up and come out there.
That's something I can discuss with the demolition contractor, and I'll present that to you guys on Monday.
Yeah, at least leave a fence up separating the graveyard for right now.
Okay.
I hope.
Yeah. I'll definitely discuss that with our demolition contractor and bring that back up Monday for you guys.
All right, thank you.
No problem.
Anyone else?
Yes, Councilman Adams, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Mr. Thompson, so
Yes.
the exact amount on our exhibit is $103,453 for the,
Correct.
yes, sir. And Councilman Adams answered the question that is still within budget. And then the last thing I was going to ask, oh, it's tipping fees, are they in here? Is that part of this? It isn't part of this contract, but in the entire scope of the project.
Yes, everything is already included. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So I did have a question. Someone did ask me about the tipping fees and I wasn't certain.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am. Is there anyone else? All right. In light of the fact that Mr. Thompson has some questions to answer for us on Monday, I will not request that this be placed on the consent agenda. We'll take a vote on that on Monday. If there's no other comment or anyone that would like to speak concerning the item, I'll move on to item B. Item B reads, authorize the mayor to sign change order number 3 to Complete Demolition Services Incorporated for the Old Mill Surface Clearing Project, amending the parties' agreement of August 22nd, 2019 to add a scope of work for additional excavation and hauling of asbestos-containing materials. Let's let Mr. Marcus Thompson fill us in on that particular item also.
Yes. So change order number 3 reflects the excavation of the basement of the main mill site building. That was not included in the original agreement. If you guys can recall, the original agreement included above surface material. The excavation of the basement would allow for the contractor to remove all asbestos containing material that have fallen in between that area, and also prevent potential safety hazards and make the overall site more aesthetically pleasing. And that service would take approximately 5 days to complete.
And Mr. Thompson, what is the cost of that service of this change order?
The overall cost would be $36,500. And also I want to bring to you guys' attention, that also includes bringing in backfill material so that we can place in that current area where the basement exists, and that will help us create a natural slope, basically.
Understood. Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Again, I'll open the floor for any comment by council or Madam Mayor. And Madam Mayor, if you had a question, we'll let you go first just to get it started.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Any council member have any question concerning this change order? Mr. Thompson's done a great job thus far with this. I appreciate you bringing it to us. And in light of having no comment or question, I'd ask that this be placed on the consent agenda for Monday night, item B.
Mr. Chairman, I'm sorry, I couldn't get my mute button done in
I
time.
couldn't get mine done either.
Mr. Chairman, this is Chris Watts. I just was going to ask the question that you'd asked about the previous item. I'm assuming by what Mr. Thompson said that this was not included in the original. So where would the funds come from for this particular change order?
Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, I can answer that. So basically, we anticipated a certain amount of loads for us to dispose of earlier. And obviously those loads are no longer, partial of that fund is no longer needed because those loads are no longer needed. So we can use those funds to perform this task basically. That's why we went with the overall decision to go ahead and excavate the basement area, because we had funds left over.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. That's all I had, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Coach. I believe, yes, Councilman Davis, I believe you had a question.
Yes, sir, for Mr. Thompson. Again, Mr. Thompson, I like that fencing around the old mill site for security and safety. So I'm hoping we can continue to keep it up till we do business.
Yes, sir.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Appreciate you all's comments. I'll go on then to item C. authorize the mayor to sign an agreement with the Erosion Company LLC for soil stabilization services at the city's old jail work site. Mr. Thompson has some updated information about that, that proposal. And we want to make sure that this does be aesthetically pleasing as much as possible once it is then converted back to a natural open site. Mr. Thompson, go ahead.
Yeah. So this agreement reflects the installation of best practice management tools, and this is to control water pollution at the jailhouse site per Vincent Campbell's erosion and settlement control plans. These devices are required before any significant land disturbing activity could be performed. I received 3 proposals for the service. The first price was from our actual demolition contractor, Complete Demolition Services, totaling $35,000. The second price was from the Erosion Management Services, totaling $30,000. And the third was from the Erosion Company, who we decided to go with, totaling approximately $20,000. The Erosion Company stated that they will be able to complete the service within 2 to 3 days.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Yeah, are there any questions?
Anyone have any question of Mr. Thompson concerning this item? Madam Mayor, did you have any questions?
No, sir.
All righty. Is there any question any of the council members would have?
Mr. Chairman, Chris Watts, just same question. Where do these funds come from for this this agreement? Is it already factored in?
Mr.
Yeah,
Thompson?
these funds are already factored in the overall budget for the old jail site project. Like I said, this service was once placed on the scope of services for complete demolition, but we found somebody else that can do it for a less expensive price, so we decided to go with them.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Coach. Anyone else? Not trying to rush things. Mr. Thompson, I appreciate you taking care of that item and saving us that money in that regard. If there is no other comment, Council or Madam Mayor, then I'm going to ask that this item C be placed on the consent agenda. I thank you, and that's all that we have tonight under finance. Thank you, Mr. Thompson.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. We'll move on to the next committee, which is Housing and Community Affairs Committee. That's chaired by Councilmember Dr. LaShawn Berdanley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are no items under Housing and Community Affairs.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yep.
We'll move on to item 8, Legislative and Intergovernmental Committee. That's chaired by Councilmember Samuel Davis.
Madam Mayor, no items at this time. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Personnel and Organization Committee, that's chaired by Councilmember Chris Watts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have 2 items tonight. Item A is to adopt an ordinance to amend various sections of the personnel policies and procedures to revise time limits on certain evaluations and filing notices of demotion to restrict how on-duty work hours may be spent and other changes for updating clarity and consistency. And I'll turn that over to Ms. Alston Bing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tia Alston Bing, Human Resources Director, City of Douglasville, 6695 Church Street. Good evening, Madam Mayor and Council. You should have in your attachments two attachments for this first item. One is a final version of the ordinance, and you should also have a red line or a track changed version. So if you would, I would like to take you through the red line version so that I can explain to you what updates we are proposing to the personnel policies and procedures.
Ms. Alston Bean, could I interrupt, please? And I don't mean to, but I just want to make sure that I'm not the only one. And I apologize. This is Councilman Adams. I don't have the ability to open the attachments from my iPad, so I cannot see the details of what we're discussing. Does anyone else have that same issue?
Mr. Adams, Councilman Adams, what I'm doing, I'm in the same boat, is I've just pulled it up on my cell phone. I've gone to our employee, it's listed in there where you can pull it up on your cell phone if you wanted to look at it.
I can
Okay,
see
thank
it
you.
now.
Someone is helping me with that. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. And Ms. Austin Bean, I apologize for interrupting.
No,
Thank
sir.
you.
No worries. If we could scroll up to section 1, I'll start with section 1. Thank you, Ms. Jackson. Again, these are updates that the Assistant City Attorney and I, Ms. Littlefield, have worked on to do a comprehensive review of the personnel policies and procedures to present to you all. So bear with me as I go through each section. It's quite a bit. So section 1, this section defines how many hours a part-time employee can work. Going down to section, which is 30 hours. Going down to section 2, this section overall is updating verbiage for advertising for regular employment. Also, the second paragraph in this section, you will see a small rewording change to our pay, to what we call our pay schedule. Section 3, moving down. This section, the language here, we're basically removing this last sentence that you see crossed out because it's part of an internal process and not to be included in the policy. Section 4, this section we are adding language to provisional employee appointments as it relates to filling our vacancy needs. Section 5, we are removing this irrelevant language in this paragraph. It does not apply. Section 6, we are updating our drug screen and motor vehicle requirements for our employees as it relates to their job descriptions. Moving down to section 7, this section specifies the probationary period requirements for employees who are hired or promoted or demoted. So this cleans up that language. Section 8, this it relates to employee notification as it relates to demotion and what that process looks like as far as notifying the employee with the approval of the Human Resources Director. So this gives clarity to how the department head and the Human Resources Director works together to notify the employee. Section 9, these updates, this update is how employees should update their personal information with the Human Resources Department and removes the payroll department from that process. Section 10, updating how to keep attendance records for the city of Douglasville. Section 11 specifies work hours and breaks and cleans up that language. Section 12, this is merely an update to the Public Services Department and removing maintenance and sanitation as the name. So that's making that update. Section 13, we are completely spelling out our holiday policy. Before it was some of the language was a footnote. And so we wanted to just basically spell out the entire policy and so that there's no confusion when locating this information. Section 14, this is the cleanup section. This section was not consistent with longstanding practice in our software tracking of leave. Uh-oh, I'm sorry, I think I was muted.
Okay.
Okay, I'm back. Okay, so this section, I'll go back, section 14. This section needed to be updated because it was not consistent with our longstanding practice of how we accrue leave here at the city of Douglasville and our software tracking of our leave. So basically leave has been accruing on the 5-year milestone anniversary and not the year prior to. So we wanted to make sure that we clean up that language and make sure that it's consistent with our longstanding practices, and that's standard. Section 15, employees can request leave through ADP now, our software, as opposed to just requesting it in writing. They do have the capability of going into the software and requesting leave. So we're cleaning that language up. Section 16 addresses the length of employee absences and what human resources is required to contact employees if their absences exceed more than 3 days instead of 5. And we will be contacting those employees to get proper documentation if need be. Section 17, merely typos, and it also defines what a service member is and what the definition is of a serious injury or illness. Section 18, this section defines what happens when an employee separates and their health insurance and how COBRA, the COBRA process to continue benefits if they wanted to under the COBRA Act. Section 19 repeals any conflicting information. So that's just merely removing that. Section 20 spells out inclement weather as it relates to any pre-approved leave and closures for inclement weather. Section 21, this includes the HR director being notified of any reasonable suspicion as it relates to drug screens. So that includes the HR director in that process. Section 22, again, notification of injuries to the HR director and the supervisor on the same day. So we want to narrow that down to notification on the same day. Section 23, this requires us to comply with state law as it relates to using communication devices, so texting and things of that nature. And Section 24, requiring our employees to take defensive driver course for at-fault accidents. And that is that. So any questions on that item? And again, if you also have a cleaned up version, a final version to see it in its final form as well. So those are all of the recommendations that we are proposing for your approval to get us into compliance with our practices as well as legal compliance.
Thank you, Ms. Austin Bing, for that report or that information. Before I take any questions, I'd just like to ask if Ms. Littlefield has anything to add. Ms. Littlefield, do you have anything to add?
No, sir, I don't.
Ms. Hampton?
No, sir, I don't have anything to add.
All right, if anybody has any questions, identify yourself and go for it.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Madam Mayor, you're first.
Thank you so much. Ms. Austin Bean, I didn't see, and this may not be in this section, but you were going over leave and all of that. For our award-based criteria, we had some concerns about 5-year, 10-year, 20-year. There's sometimes awards and compensation is attached with those awards. Is there any place in our personnel policy that talks about that or addresses the time length and all of that? Am I making myself?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I think you're speaking as it relates to our annual service awards.
Yes, ma'am. And some people some left at 20 years and he retired before and he said it was 22 and we didn't have 20. It was a big confusion. And since there is financial compensation associated oftentimes with that, I didn't know if that was addressed in this section or if we had that spelled out anywhere.
No, ma'am, we do not have any compensation spelled out as it relates to milestones for service awards. This is as it relates to leave accrual for milestones. So we
Okay, is that addressed anywhere?
not in the personnel policies and procedures. So I can,
I can add in, I'm sorry, just to chime in, Tia. That's actually done via resolution, very similar to some of the bonuses that you have. Those are budget dependent. So at times we haven't given financial compensation along with service awards. It's just something that we've done as the budget has allowed.
Okay, so, but the criteria will be spelled out in the resolution so that there won't be any questions. Like, you know, the last rotation that we had some questions from employees that were retiring, and there we had discrepancies on the length of service and awards and, you know, the date that they said they were retiring and all of that. You remember that, City Manager?
Yes, ma'am, I do. And a lot of that just has to do with the tenure in which some of those employees serve, but we can make certain that we can address any of those things that happened previously in a resolution that we would do this year if the budget allows us to provide those type of compensation.
Thank you so much. And then the other one is about drug screening. And I know this is leave and all of that. So is there anywhere where that's addressed as well? I know there was some, maybe some interpretation about is it part-time, full-time, when people will have the drug screening and all of that? Do we have a criteria for that spelled out anywhere?
Yes, ma'am. We require pre-employment drug screens for all employees that are newly hired into the city. We also have requirements for anybody that is that would be promoted to from going from a non-safety sensitive position to a safety sensitive position. That is already included in our personnel policies and procedures, as well as we've spelled out in our policy already that it's not a part of this update, but is already spelled out for us as it relates to how we conduct random drug screenings.
Okay.
So we do have our drug screen procedures are spelled out very clear in our PPP already. We have, let's see, there was one mention in section, this particular attachment, I think it was section 21.
21, alcohol, 615-4.
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
So the updates is what I presented to the mayor and council tonight on what we were adding, but in the complete document, you will see the rest of the drug screen requirements and our processes and procedures. But it's not redlined on this attachment because we've not made any changes to it.
Okay, thank you so much. And I apologize for going off script a little bit. I didn't want to try to get those questions in when I could.
Yes,
so I
ma'am.
appreciate your patience. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much for allowing me to ask those questions that were not attached to this document.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And based on what you said, it brought a question into my mind, Ms. Bing. If we have an employee involved in an accident of driving a city vehicle, is drug alcohol screening automatically part of that? I know if you're driving a Six Flags vehicle and you get in an accident, it's automatic. So I was just wondering, I didn't see that in there, if that's.
Yes, sir. It is already in our policy.
Okay.
A drug screen is required for any accident or injury that requires treatment beyond first aid. It's already in our policy.
Thank you. I missed that. Thank you. Any other questions from council? Okay. Anybody need to hit that mute? We're good. All right. Would this be something that I could have placed on the consent agenda? No? Yes? Everybody okay with that? All right. We're going to place that on a consent agenda. All right. Item B, adopt an ordinance to enact section 17.3 of the Personnel Policies and Procedure Ordinance of the City of Douglasville to provide for the use of city facilities, including the police department, gymnasium, and the City Employee Wellness Center. Ms. Alston Bing.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Section 17-3, if you click on your attachment, is where we begin. And if you, Ms. Jackson, if you'll go down a little, thank you. Exhibit A, The police department gymnasium. So we wanted to include this as well. There is a need to make sure that we spell out how the PD gym is being used. Overall, the police chief has the authority to manage the PD gym as it relates to maintenance, cleaning the facility. Also, the police department employees, they have certain requirements that they must meet using the PD gym. The police chief also has allowed other full-time employees, in addition to his department employees, to use the PD gym, and would like to put some parameters in place as it relates to tracking who's coming in the PD gym, who's going out. He also wants to require that certain safety precautions are being followed. People are, basically helping with keeping the gym up, intact. And so this policy allows for that. Also, signing of any waivers. We spell that out as it relates to city use for anyone other than the certified police officers. So we would like to put that in place for the PD gym to have some processes and procedures for checking in for safety and liability purposes, and that the police chief would have the authority to basically manage all of that. So that's for paragraph A. Paragraph B, the Wellness Center facility. So as you all know, we are going live with Care Here for our Wellness Center on Monday. And we'd like to have this policy in place as it relates to those that will be using the center. Only those covered by the city's health plan. Also spelling out how employees would use this as it relates to being on the clock, being off the clock, what they can be seen for as far as services, illnesses and health conditions, and then also using sick leave if it was outside of any work hours. So the same thing that they would use sick leave for anything else would be allowed to be used to be seen at the Wellness Center. And so that's basically overall what we would need this policy in place for. We would also have some standard operating procedures that would help us to manage usage, help us to manage appointments that are missed, and help us to manage record retention and employees being solely allowed, them being the sole person to receive their records from the Wellness Center, and as opposed to anyone else trying to get those records. So those two facility policies we'd like to bring before you so that we can have a guideline in how we operate going forward with those facilities.
Thank you, Ms. Austin Bing. Madam Mayor, do you have any? I'll start with you, then open the floor.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Austin Bean, I know that this policy for the gymnasium for the police department, but the wellness center, I did see something where you sent out that was appointment only. That is not spelled out in here. Is that just policy and it doesn't need to be corrected, or we're going to change? It's not just a walk-up center. You have to make an appointment, but that is not in this ABC.
Yeah, so that will be part of our standard operating procedures. But right now, to use the wellness center, they will require several ways to be seen, and that's by calling. So if it's the same day, they can, and they have appointments available, they would be able to be seen, or they could make pre-appointments by scheduling, as well as using the app. So there are several ways that they can make appointments. If they need to walk in, they would take that walk-in based on working around the appointments that have already been scheduled.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am, but that would be part of standard operating procedures.
Okay, and they don't need to have a referral from a physician, their primary care physician. They could just, okay.
No, they do not.
Whole other
But what they can do, if they choose to, is allow the wellness center physicians to share the records from their primary care physician, if that's their pleasure. Otherwise, the tracking of the employee being seen at the wellness center would just be those records that we would have access to.
All right. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One quick question, Ms. Bing. This facility, the Wellness Center, won't have the capability to do x-rays or anything like that, will it?
Yes, so they will have where they will refer that out. They won't be able to have a machine on site, but they will have the ability to partner and refer that out for x-rays.
Thank you. Any other questions from council? Identify yourself and ask your question. Okay, thank you, Ms. Austin Bing, for that. And I'd like to also place this on the consent agenda for Monday. Madam Mayor, that's all I had under personnel and organization.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. We'll move on then to item number 10, which is Planning and Development Committee. That's chaired by Councilmember Mark Adams.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have several items tonight under Planning and Development. We will start with item A, adopt a resolution declaring May 2020 as a National Historic Preservation Month for the city of Douglasville. And Ms. Patrice Williams is going to speak to that item.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Patrice Williams, Community Development Director, 6701 Church Street. This is an annual resolution that Mayor and Council adopts. While we're unable to join the county hosting our joint HPC luncheon this year, we respectfully request the adoption of this resolution in support of the hard work and dedication of the many who continue to help preserve the history in our community. So we certainly would like this resolution adopted if possible.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Is there any comment? Madam Mayor, do you have any comment or any council member have any comment concerning this item?
No,
Please
sir.
speak up. Please speak up. Ms. Williams, thank you very much for that. I'd ask that that be placed on the consent agenda for Monday. Moving on to item B, consider a request for revised plat approval for Tributary at New Manchester, Parcel B, Section 1B, for the purpose of increasing the street frontage for lots 248 through 250 and 287 through 289, and reducing the street frontage for lots 283 through 286, and increasing lot depth for lots 227 through 240 in land lot 155, District 1, Section 5. Application by Steve Osterberg for Tributary Atlanta, ASLI 7 LLLP. Ms. Williams, please carry us through this item. Thank you.
Patrice Williams, Community Development Director, 6701 Church Street. This item actually combines several lots, making the lots bigger. This was a request from the applicant. City staff has reviewed the request and has determined that the proposed revised plat meets the purpose and the intent of the City of Douglasville's Unified Development Ordinance. Staff recommends approval of this revised plat.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Williams. As Ms. Williams has stated, this would actually reduce the number of lots and would increase the size of those lots. And it has come before us by Mr. Steve Osterberg for Tributary. Any question or comment? And I'm going to call on Mr. Estes, since this is an area within your purview, Mr. Estes. Did you specifically have any question or comment concerning this?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. No, I don't. I would follow the lead of the staff's recommendation.
Thank you, sir. Is there anyone else that would have any question or comment? Please identify yourself. Madam Mayor? Okay. If there are none, because and I'll ask Ms. Littlefield. Ms. Littlefield, was there a problem that we would potentially put this on the consent agenda? It looks as though no one has any issue with it, or is this something that we need to formally vote on individually on Monday?
It can be on the consent agenda. Plats can be on the consent agenda.
Just want to make sure before I request that. Is there any problem with placing that on the consent agenda? Madam Mayor or Council? Thank you. Moving on to item C then. Consider a request for revised plat approval for Tributary at New Manchester Village Center for the purpose of increasing street frontage for lots D81 through D94 in land lot 155, District 1, Section 5. Application again by Steve Osterberg for Tributary Atlanta, ASLI 7 LLLP. Ms. Williams?
Patrice Williams, Community Development Director, 6701 Church Street. Again, this request also combines several lots, making them bigger. And so staff has reviewed the request and has determined that the proposed revised plat meets the purpose and the intent of the City of Douglasville Unified Development Ordinance. Staff recommends approval of the revised plat.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Any comment or question? Again, I'll go to Councilman Estes.
Again, Mr. Chairman, no questions or comments other than following the recommendation of staff.
Thank you,
Thank
sir. Any others? Is there anyone that would have any question or comment concerning that item? Again, then I'll ask it to be placed on the consent agenda for Monday. We'll move on to item D, consider a request for revised plat approval for Tributary at New Manchester, Parcel D, Section 1, for the purpose of increasing street frontage for lots D9 and through D35, D63 through D66, and D127 through D130 in land lot 155, District 1, Section 5. Application again by Steve Osterberg for Tributary Atlanta, ASLI 7 LLLP. Ms. Williams.
Patrice Williams, Community Development Director, 6701 Church Street. As the previous two items, this item as well combines several lots, making them bigger. City staff has reviewed the request and has determined that the proposed revised plat meets the purpose and the intent of the City of Douglasville Unified Development Ordinance. Staff recommends approval for this revised plat.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Anyone have any question or comment concerning this item? Seeing none.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
I apologize. I just wanted to state for the record that to show an appreciation for Mr. Osterberg and what he's doing in the Tributary subdivision for this plat and making these adjustments. I think it's a positive thing that he's heard some of the comments from the council and that he's making adjustments, and we appreciate that. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Any others? Hearing none, then I would ask that item D be placed on the consent agenda for Monday. Moving on to item E, consider a request for revised plat approval for CP Douglas Place 1 LLC for the purpose of subdividing into 8 tracts, 125.97 acres, land lot 158 through 162, District 2, Section 5, parcels 13 and 31. Application by PGIM Real Estate. Ms. Williams, help us with that item, please.
Patrice Williams, Community Development Director, 6701 Church Street. This request is connected to item number 20-003, which was heard by Mayor and Council back in March. At that time, the applicant requested to rezone 3 tracts of land, 1 parcel from general commercial to office distribution, tract 3, and light industrial, tracts 1 and 2. The request was approved by Mayor and Council. According to a representative of the applicant, this request is the next step in moving this overall project forward. City staff has reviewed the request and has determined that the proposed revised plat meets the purpose and the intent of the city's Unified Development Ordinance. Staff recommends approval of the revised plat.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Again, a different applicant, but a similar situation in that we are revising a plat. It looks as though we're breaking it into, I believe you'd said, Ms. Williams, 8 tracts. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Question or comment from council or Madam Mayor? Any comment? Please identify yourself.
No comment.
Gee, this seems easy all of a sudden. I've not moved through an agenda on my part in a while this fast. Okay, seeing none, then I would request also that item E be placed on the consent agenda. And I'll move on to the final item. Consider a request for approval for roadway dedication to the City of Douglasville for CP Douglas Place 1 LLC, revised plat, tract 7, also known as Concourse Parkway, for 2.39 acres in land lot 159 through 162, District 2, Section 5, parcel 31, application by PGIM Real Estate. Ms. Williams, can you explain this to us, please?
Patrice Williams, Community Development Director, 6701 Church Street. At this time, Councilman Adams, I would like to defer to the applicant as they would like to make a request.
All righty. If the applicant will please come forward to the phone line, identify yourself, name and address for the record, and we're ready to hear from you, please.
You have to unmute your phone.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This is Aaron McCullough, 6554 Church Street.
Good evening, Mr. McCullough. How are you, sir?
Excellent, Councilman Adams.
Appreciate you coming forward.
At this time, the applicant would like to request that this item of the roadway dedication be tabled for this item.
Okay. Could someone help me, please, with the dates if we were to consider going forward with this as far as a tabled item? Would that be the 28th?
Yes,
And
May 28th.
First, May 28th and June 1st. Is that what we would do?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any question or comment for the applicant by either Madam Mayor or the council? Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I was going to ask, I apologize. I was going to ask, would that give them enough time, May 28th and June 1st, or do they need June 11th and the 15th?
Mr. McCullough?
Additional time would be requested.
So not May 28th and June 1st?
June 11th, June 15th.
Okay.
If you can provide that time, we would appreciate that.
All righty. We'll take that under advisement then. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and Mr. McCullough. Thank you so much for bringing it forward.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, go ahead, Mr. Miller.
I don't know if this question is premature or not, but I wanted, the purpose of this originally being brought to council, is this that you want to, and tell me if I'm misunderstanding, you're essentially turning that right away over to the city? Is that what the intent here is? Mr. McCullough?
Councilman Miller, yes, sir, that is the intent.
Okay, that's just want to clarify what was the point of that. Okay, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, hearing none, then we'll take this item up, item F, on Monday night. And Madam Mayor, that's all that I have under planning and development. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. We'll move on to item 11, which is Public Improvement and Beautification Committee. That's chaired by Councilmember Nicole Miller.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have no business this evening for Public Improvement and Beautification.
I know, it's a different name. Thank you.
Thanks.
You're welcome. We'll move on to Public Relations Committee. That's chaired by Councilmember Howard Estes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have no business tonight for the Public Relations Committee.
Thank you, sir. Public Safety Committee, that's chaired by Councilmember Samuel Davis.
Yes, I have one item. Authorize the mayor to sign an agency application and participation agreement with the Georgia Associated Chief of Police, INC, for the Watson Department participation in the Association of Law Enforcement Certification Program. Deputy Chief Sue Shaw.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Sue Ann Shaw from the Douglasville Police Department. I'm the Deputy Chief and the address is 2083 Fairburn Road. This application and agreement is something that we renew every 3 years for our participation in the state of Georgia Law Enforcement Certification Program through the Georgia Chiefs. This certification assures that our policies and procedures are conceptually sound and operationally effective. We first became state certified in 2014, and we are renewing it this year. The cost on this is $375 per year, and we do have to pay the fees for the travel and per diem for the state assessors when they come out to do our assessment, and we are reassessing this year.
Okay, thank you, Deputy Chief. Mayor, Madam Mayor, questions?
Yes, sir. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Good evening. Good to see you, Deputy Chief Shaw. I had a question about Section A, where it gives the statistics of our department, and we have 101 full-time sworn in personnel and 4 part-time. With that 105 sworn personnel, is that with the GBI, or not the GBI, but maybe the national statistics for cities our size? with our population of 34,190. Is that appropriate, or do we need more or less, or how's that work out?
That was put into place a couple of years ago by either a resolution or ordinance by the city council. At this time, we feel it's an appropriate number. I would have to check the FBI. They do have a ratio of officers per the population. I would have to check that to see if it's completely in line with that, but I know we got these extra officers a few years ago, and we appreciate that. But we feel it's an appropriate number right now.
Okay, I said GBI, but I thought it was FBI. And the other reason why I'm asking that question is because we're getting ready to do our census for 2020 and anticipating that the population will be closer to 40,000. That's what I'm told. So I know we don't have we have a hiring freeze now because of COVID-19, but if we can kind of think about those projections coming up, if the statistics come out from the census that it's closer to that number of 40,000 versus 34.
Yes, ma'am.
Population.
We will definitely take a look. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Deputy Chief. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other council members? Madam Mayor, I'd like to put this on the consent agenda for Monday, and Deputy Chief can bring the information back to us.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll move on from Public Safety to Recreation, Culture, and Tourism Committee. That's chaired by Council Member Chris Watts.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have no business tonight under Recreation, Culture, and Tourism. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Coach. I will move on then to Technology Committee. That's chaired by Mayor Pro Tem Terry Miller.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have one item under the Technology Committee tonight. That is to authorize the mayor to sign an agreement with Malden Jenkins LLC to provide security testing for the city's information technology systems. Assistant City Manager Chelsea Jackson has some background on that for us.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chelsea Jackson, 6695 Church Street. If you all can remember in February when Malden and Jenkins did our audit reportings, they recommended that the city perform an up-to-date risk assessment in order to formalize information as it relates to security policies and to improve our internal controls as it relates to cybersecurity and city data. This will be an ongoing assessment that will be performed twice a year to identify IT best practices. The first assessment will be performed by Malden and Jenkins. Staff has reviewed all of their references checks and they've been completed. The total cost of this project will be $24,000. The assessment will be designed to perform concurrently and continuously to form a culture that addresses cybersecurity risk for the city of Douglasville. The assessment will provide the current state of our risk, identify opportunities of improvement, and identify and communicate among internal and external customers and the risk. It'll also produce security weaknesses for our IT environment, as well as analyze and prioritize gaps and create an implementation action plan. This is currently budgeted in this year's budget, as well as next year's budget for future assessments. Are there any questions?
Anybody, Mayor or any member of council have any questions or issues with this? It appears to be basically, as Jackson mentioned, it's like it's a once per, I guess, semi-annual essentially inspection of our the robustness of our cybersecurity. If I'm not explaining that right, let me know, Ms. Jackson.
No, Mr. Chair, it's absolutely correct. It will be performed twice a year as it relates to IT best practices. They do state that you perform an IT assessment about twice every year. They do also recommend that you do the assessment with different companies. For example, each company may not identify any risks that you may potentially have. So that's why for most cases, for the next time you'll see this assessment come before you, it will be another company because they can identify other risk factors that Malden and Jenkins may not identify.
Any questions or comments or concerns? Seeing or hearing none, if there's no objection, I'd like to put this on the consent agenda for Monday. Thank you, Madam Mayor. That's all I have under the Technology Committee.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem and Ms. Jackson. We'll move on then to Transportation Committee. That's chaired by Councilmember Dr. LaShawn Burdanley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There are no items under Transportation Committee tonight.
Thank you, ma'am.
You're welcome.
Is there any other Oh, okay. I apologize. Is there any other business to come before council this evening before we go with the updates and staff reports? I did have a couple of things. The first one, and this is rhetorical because I know you're already prepared, City Manager, for our meeting on the 28th. Do we have the thermometers to check for temperatures, for social distancing?
I'll have to ask Greg, what's the status on those? I can tell you that we have ordered those. They're not in. If you all are anticipating that you're not going to let anyone in, if they register a certain temperature, you just need to let us know. So far, we haven't had any issue with those individuals who are coming into City Hall in lieu of us not necessarily having the thermometers at this point. Everyone has been adhering to social distancing orders and coming in with face covers.
Okay, so for thermometers for us too, you know, the elected officials and staff, because we're going to be apart from each other, but still may cross paths. And the other thing that you were saying, having a face cover, we did receive masks from Public Health, and I wanted to publicly thank them for Douglas County Public Health. Lisa Grossman provided probably 200 or 300 masks. And so I did provide those to the city manager's office, and the Conference of Mayors, the United States Conference of Mayors provided 200. So those cloth masks were left at City Hall, and I asked Miss Maria, my executive assistant, to provide a couple of masks for each council member because the police department said they had plenty, and we've gotten several masks. So I wanted to show appreciation to her for that. So that was one item. And then the other one, City Manager, I know I had, and I apologize if this is out of school to talk about, but just to put it on the radar, our contracts, if we have a provision in there for companies not to hire that company back or preclude them from bidding on a contract if their work is unfinished or unsatisfactory. Did we make that provision in our contracts and bids that we put out for RFQ and RFP and all of that?
All of our RFPs are different. We can start putting performance clause in there. Ms. Littlefield would have to explain legally how that would have to happen.
Okay, and so council members, I would, when Ms. Littlefield brings it to us to discuss, if we would kind of put that on our minds to think about if we have a company per se that does work and is unsatisfactory or is pending, would we preclude them from trying to bid on a current project if they haven't finished the past project, or if it's unsatisfactory? So
Madam
we,
Mayor?
yes, ma'am, Mr. Tim.
This is Councilman Miller. Yeah, I had
Yes,
quick
sir.
question to add on to what you're bringing up. Maybe this is more for Susan Littlefield. Do we have clause for liquidated damages typically in our contracts?
Depends on how big they are. We don't put those into small contracts under about 20,000 because it drives away bidders. But in anything that's larger, you'll often see it there, and we tailor the amount to the size of the contract. Sometimes we do and sometimes we don't, but those are controlled in the RFP by whoever is making up the RFP usually, but that's generally how it's done.
Okay, I thought, Madam Mayor, that would be important addition to what you're bringing up, would be to encourage that in our contracts, because if we're going to be focusing on performance and value of performance and time frame and on budget is an important part of that. So
yes, sir. Yes, sir.
That's all, Madam Mayor.
Any other comments from council members?
Madam Mayor, I have a question.
Councilman Adams.
Councilman Adams, yes. You brought up the potential notification of not allowing a vendor to bid if they were not complete with a project, or if they had done unsatisfactory work in the past. I think that you may cause a problem if they just happen to be the group that is in process on a job and not complete. Doesn't mean they haven't satisfactorily completed it. So I don't know that you would want to preclude them from bidding. Otherwise, you'll only able to have them do one job at a time, start to finish, before they would be qualified or allowed to bid on another. I just caution that part of your statement as to whether or not that would need to be included. Thank you.
Yes, sir. I guess I was saying if it's not in a timely manner, if they were, and I hate to use this strong term, but if they were derelict in that contract. So if they currently have a contract and it's suspended maybe a year or 2 years, would we still allow them to bid on another project or future?
If I could speak up, please.
I mean, Miss Littlefield, I apologize.
Thank you. Actually, there is state law with regard to that. We can't impose just anything we would like. It has to be a very objective standard. And the fact that they're working for us on another project would not be something we could use it to preclude it anyway. But I'll be glad to bring you some language that I think is acceptable that I've seen in other contracts and RFPs. And we'll get to where you're going, but probably not with the words that we've discussed tonight.
Yes, ma'am. And I don't want to be prejudiced towards anyone and really put anyone out of bidding on projects. I was just trying to get us where there's a standard for us. And certainly if we've hired them to do work, we think that they are competent enough to do it. And we would want to have them have an opportunity to bid on other work. I'm just saying if something, a catastrophe happened and they couldn't continue to do the current project, but they want to do a future project, and it may put us in a time frame where we're behind on everything because we have someone who's not able to do the work. Absolutely. They have the heart to do it, but they're not physically able to do it.
Absolutely. And it's incumbent upon us too, if a contractor is not performing adequately, it's incumbent upon us to make some sort of notation or record of that and to let him know and to terminate that contract if we're dissatisfied with it.
Yes, ma'am, that's fair. Any other comments from council members? I thought I heard someone else. Okay, thank you so much. And the last thing I would say under other business is, unfortunately, I had to attend a funeral today. Our former vice chair, Wilford Smith, moved his mother, that was on our zoning board, planning commission, moved his mother from New Jersey about 3 years ago. She was sick and he put her in a nursing home there on Highway 5 and she passed away. So her service was today, and my husband and I conducted that service. And it was a social distancing, under 10 people. Willie Watkins did an excellent job, something very new. They had Zoom, so all the family members in New York and New Jersey and all over were able to see the service during Zoom. But she is our 12th person to pass from COVID-19 in the county. But the good thing is that I was able to drive on Highway 92 to see the realignment, and it's coming along very, very well. It looks really nice. And I wanted to commend the workers for what they're doing on that realignment project. So if you would, please keep Wilford Smith, he's an only child, keep him in your prayers as he's lost his mom. So any other business to come before us this evening? Okay, if not, we'll go to item 18, which is updates from city staff. Mr. Dotson isn't on our call tonight, so we'll go to Chief Assistant City Attorney, Ms. Susan Littlefield.
No business, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. Our Deputy Chief of Police Department, Deputy Chief Sue-Ann Shaw.
No business, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
You're welcome. Our City Manager, Ms. Marcia Hampton.
Yes, ma'am. The only thing to add is things are going well with City Hall being open up as we continue to follow along with the governor's orders as the state continues to open more opportunity and services. We will be following suit with that. We're trying to make certain that we're paying attention to what our peer organizations are doing, not necessarily being maybe as restrictive as some or as relaxed as others, or being somewhere in the middle. So if we need to pull back, we're positioning ourselves to do so. All of your staff in some way, shape, or form is back to work with social distancing in mind. inclusive of still utilizing a flex type schedule where we are having some folks maybe 1 or 2 days out of the week work from home, but the majority of your folks are back operating and working full time in the facilities. Ms. Angie Cochran will talk to you about Municipal Court. Travis Landrum will talk to you about parks. Your remainder, your services that we still have to deal with outside of those two that will be presented this afternoon will be your special event facilities. That's inclusive of the Conference Center, Alice Hawthorne Center, and the Ike Owens Building in the community room over at the PD. I have instructed staff to get together to come up with a policy that we would work on in anticipation of the governor's order, which will possibly allow us to open up those facilities in a more expanded capacity in July. So June will be an opening for some things, just as we're doing for May and July. So we're taking things in stages so that we're not overwhelming ourselves, or if something changes, we're easily able to pull back. Employees are encouraged to wear masks in general. If they choose to do so, those who engage with the public are required to do so. You should see plexiglass all around our facilities. Those have been installed by Public Services, as well as key markers on the floor, encouraging social distancing and signage on the outside of the buildings and around the buildings, indicating what we require. We do have some handheld thermometers that are, that Ms. Jackson just informed me, that are now with our receptionists. Ms. Cochran will tell you what they choose to do with those. I will tell you that most jurisdictions are not requiring those because they're balancing where they would be from legal ramifications. We as staff who've been working have not checked for temperature, but we can make certain to do those for you all. I would just add that if indeed you do register a temperature, you may want to develop some type of plan as to what you all may choose to do. And I'll have to get with Ms. Littlefield as to what that means for us turning away the public to your public meetings. So we would just have to discuss what that would look like. But overall, we look good for opening. I think things are working very well. Staff is working very well. So I don't anticipate us having any challenges. I am going to be participating on a webinar with GMA next week on how to safely open your local government. I'll be on a panel with 2 other jurisdictions, so we'll be talking to the balance of the state on some best practices on being able to open up. So with that, I'll entertain any questions that you all may have. If not, we're ready for the staff reports.
Thank you so much, City Manager. I'll open the floor for questions from council members, but I would say, you know, I serve on Public Health Board as well, and that is a recommendation as for the thermometers, and that's why I was hoping we had those forehead ones. But I understand if it's going to be very cumbersome, and we're asked if you know you feel sick to stay home, and I think the temperature is 104 or something like that, but that is the recommendation, is to have the thermometer, or have your temperature taken before you have meetings, public meetings. Staff has made their reports. Our city manager, do we have any questions for the city manager based on what she said from council members? Okay, if not, then we'll move to staff reports, and Councilman Samuel Davis, who is a Public Safety Committee Chair, would you please take A for me?
Call the order A, staff report regarding the opening of the Municipal Court. Ms. Angie.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We're finally going to get to open up court. They signed the judicial order on May the 11th. Chief Justice Melton is allowing smaller courts at a lower level to start opening with a small amount of people. And as long as we stay in the guidelines of what Governor Kemp has said about social distancing, they are going to allow us to have court. So if you'll notice, I have attached attachment number 2 is the notice that we've mailed out to everyone that is on the docket for court, how we're going to operate at a smaller level. We're going to be Actually, we are going to be taking people's temperature before they come into court. And if they register with the CD guidelines, then we are going to turn them away and give them a new court date. If I have to, I will see if the judge maybe wants to sign an order to allow us to do that. But he hasn't said anything about it yet. But we start on May the 20th, and we are going to have 2 small sessions that morning. We're going to start at 9 a.m. and have only 24 defendants come into court. We will have signage up saying where they need to stand. We'll have someone checking them in. We're not allowing anyone else in the courtroom other than the defendant. If they have a problem and need someone to come with them, we will reset them that day and allow them to come at a later date, and so we can allow for the numbers to be what they have set us out that we can have. Hopefully we can get through those 24 in an hour and a half, and after that is done, we will wipe down the whole courtroom, and then we'll allow the next 24 to come in. We've really planned it out, and we hope that it works. Nobody's been through it yet, but we're hoping that it's going to work. We're pretty sure it will. We're just going to be safe, make everybody wear masks. We have plexiglass put up. We have our defendants sitting 6 feet apart. We have place markers on the benches so they'll know where to sit. I will be coordinating everything, running around trying to make sure everybody is acting right. I guess not getting in a big group or nothing, because we want to respect the social distancing guidelines. If y'all have any questions or concerns, please let me know.
Okay, Miss Angie, once the first group leave out, would there be anyone sanitizing?
Yes, our whole group, we've decided that we were just going to take some Clorox wipes or Lysol wipes, wipe down all the benches. We're trying to allow 30 minutes in between each group so we can wipe down the benches, wipe down the microphones and the podium and all that. We're not going to let anybody inside the bar so that they can't get near the judge or near any of the personnel. So we hope that once we get them in and out, we're going to try to sanitize everything. And we have hired a company to come in on Wednesday nights to sanitize after court's over with. And we didn't bring them back on Thursday night because we felt like that a week's time would be efficient, that the virus wouldn't be lasting that long. And if we feel like we need to bring them in after that, we will. But yes, we're going to sanitize. My hands are all tore up from sanitizing so much, and we all are just going to have to do it. So if anybody else,
Another question.
Any questions?
Restroom duty during that time.
Yes.
Would there be someone checking the restrooms?
Yes, Kevin will be checking the restrooms after his court, making sure it stays clean and sanitized.
Okay. Okay, council members.
I have a question, Councilman Davis.
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Ms. Angie.
Okay.
Yes, as the courts open, reopen back up, how are you starting staff? How are you starting staff back to work?
Ms. Cochran.
Miss Angie, you're on. You need to unmute. You need to unmute. You need to.
I see you talking, Ms. Cochran. Unmute.
We can't hear you, Miss Angie.
I think it's her video. It's not muting. It's her video that's not coming through.
Okay.
Okay. Ms. Hampton, are you able to answer that question?
From my understanding, and Miss Angie, if you want to send a message so that Dr. Burdanley can see this to make certain that I'm not leaving anything out or misconstruing. Your staff has really been working. They've been working a flex schedule. They are already the 6 feet apart. They don't have that issue. They're going to have the face mask on. They're able to work in an environment where they're not going to either overcrowd themselves or over the public. But really, for the most part, her staff has already been there working. So not a lot is going to change other than protecting themselves and the public.
Okay, so I was mostly speaking of the staff that we had spoken about that would be furloughed. So are you stating that there were no staff that were furloughed?
They are, she may have had some, but everyone will be called back now that work is in play.
Okay.
Are you able to talk? Are you able to address that now, Ms. Cochran?
Could y'all not, I know my
Now we
computer keeps going out. Yes, we're.
We can't hear her.
Yes, her, if you remember from the discussion that we had, those employees that potentially would have been furloughed that were on the list, it was really just waiting for the judge's order. So now that we have the judge's order, those individuals can be put back to work. And that's inclusive of court security.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other questions, Chairman.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Madam Mayor.
I do have a question. Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. Number 3 in your notice says something about defendants who are 60 years and older with medical conditions, and they don't feel comfortable coming to court. So Ms. Cochran, it says that, and then you go down to number 5 that says if you don't come for 2 times that you're going to be fined $200. So there might be someone who has something like lupus. So are they not going to come until a vaccine, or how are you going to handle that? And how do you know if they're 60 and they say they do, or if they really do have a condition?
Y'all hear me?
Now we can.
You
Yes,
hear me?
ma'am.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Well, number 3 is we would love for them to call us prior to the court date so we can get them reset. And we are going to be very lenient. We're going to have to be. And if they have a medical condition, they say, that compromises their immune. We've already had several people that's called and provided documentation. But the other one that you were asking about, the number 5, is we're going to be on a strict timeline. So we're asking everyone to be there at least 15 minutes prior to court. And the reason, and if they're not, we will have to reset them because we won't be able to let them walk in like we normally do. But if they continue to be late, then that's when we'll do the failure to appear. We normally don't do that. It's just sometimes you'll have people that just want to come in anytime they want. They don't want to get there because there is things that you have to do before court starts. The judge has to do his speech. They have to be given their rights. So we have to stay on a timeline to keep it working. So that's the only reason that we said after the second time you will be given a failure to appear. Not anybody that is compromised. We hope that they'll stay in touch with us. And
yes,
as long as we can stay in touch with them and the governor says that there's still need for medically fragile and older adults to stay home, we will adhere to that.
Thank you so much, Ms. Cochran. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's like going to the doctor's office. You have to get there before your actual appointment because you have some things to take care of.
Get you checked
Thank
in.
you so much. Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Thank you,
any other
Mr. Chairman.
council members? Any other council members before we leave that?
Mr. Chairman,
Okay,
just one, this is Chris Watts. Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? Yes, Mr. Chairman. Just one question. So anybody that has a medical excuse. They basically have to show proof or documentation of that to be able to use that excuse.
Yes, if it continues on, the first time we will let them just reset, but if it continues on, they keep telling us they can't come because they have, then we will require them to notify us with some kind of doctor's excuse, telling us that they can't appear in court.
Thank you, Ms. Cochran. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I have.
Okay, if no other questions, I'm gonna make a motion adjourn.
I don't think we don't need the motion, do we?
No.
No, we don't need it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We'll move on. It's just a report, so we don't have to, but we appreciate your efficiency. We'll move on to our Parks and Recreation and Culture Tourism Committee, which is Chairman Chris Watts, and that's Mr. Landrum.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. We have one item tonight, staff report on park security and reopening facility operations. Mr. Landrum.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Travis Landrum, Parks and Recreation Director, 8830 Gurley Road, Douglasville, Georgia. As mentioned, we have two topics to discuss tonight, one being park security and one being the reopening that we'll look to propose for our facilities. If I could ask Ms. Jackson to share the slide presentation, please. Yes, sir. You have a very large document, so it's taken a while to download. Give me about 20 seconds and it'll be up on your screen. Thank you, ma'am.
It's on our iPads for some, I mean, we may already have it. I already have.
If you have it on your, if you have it on your cell phone, if you've pulled it up that way, the attachment's there.
My cell phone dead.
Or the iPad. It's on my iPad.
I don't have it on mine, but anyway.
62 pages.
Mr. Landrum, until Ms. Jackson pulls it up, do you want to just maybe cover a couple quick things?
Yes, sir. I can go ahead and jump into the presentation. So the slide that if you're able to view the attachment or once it pulls up, the first slide will show where we did an analysis of 12 agencies locally and throughout the state regarding the handling of security in their parks. These agencies range from similar like size of Douglasville to mid and even larger municipalities. Of all the agencies reviewed, none of them operate with a third-party vendor providing such service. Thank you, Chelsea. That slide there. These agencies address monitoring of their parks either in-house or with assistance with their police department via the park rangers or some type of park patrol, park security. The biggest highlight, along with none of those agencies contracting a third-party vendor, is the method used considering the number of parks and recreation centers they have compared to Douglasville. As you can see, the size of Cobb County and Columbus and the methods that they utilize are some of the things that stand out. Similar to Ackworth, we're looking into research regarding locking mechanisms with IT. This would assist as far as opening and securing the bathrooms that we have in our parks and our amenities. So our recommendation would be most similar to what Marietta is utilizing, which is in-house staff. In our scenario right now, this would be utilizing staff that have currently, scheduled to be furloughed that we could utilize now, giving them tasks and duties to perform. And this recommendation would not only be more fiscally responsible, but also trend as a better practice like other agencies you see displayed on the first slide. On the second slide, this slide gives you clarity amongst the methods used by other agencies. As you descend through the types of services, the level of authority, abilities, and enforcement weakens. So park rangers, they have a broader range of coverage. They're able to cover the city and the county. They have retaining abilities.
and they are also able to enforce the law and writing citations. As you see on the next one, the park security, similar to what Douglas County has operated with city or county employees. They have the same similar capacity as the park rangers, but their range is down just to the jurisdiction that they have in their parks. Park security, which is the contract services that we have, they patrol only the city parks. They don't have any law enforcement abilities, no retaining authority. And in the event of an emergency, they will have to call the police or the sheriff's department. Park monitors, similar to the park security that we have, they'll still patrol the parks. They don't have any enforcement abilities. And in the event of emergency, they'll contact the police. But unlike what we currently have, our staff would be able to do additional tasks and duties such as maintaining the parks, cleaning, securing gates, trash, things of that nature. The next slide, on slide 3, I'm sorry, Chelsea, the one more slide ahead, slide 3. Yeah, keep going to the slide prior.
I think you got to go backwards. There you go.
Thank you. Right there. So this slide breaks down the duties and services we currently receive from park security and the measures we would take in our recommendation to meet and exceed the current level of service. As it relates to parking for special events, we could have staff operate as parking aids. For larger events, we could seek assistance from the PD, example being when we had Wednesday Wind Down or when we have large tournaments here at the park. They were able to assist during their regular zone patrol and or if they were assigned for that particular detail. As it relates to locking the bathrooms, again, the proposal that we're looking at with IT is to purchase and install the locking mechanisms on the doors. Until that is something that we are able to procure, it would be addressed with staff. And lastly, the security presence during the sporting events, kind of got a little ahead of myself. Again, the assistance from the Douglasville PD would be vital in that. And in the event, if it's a larger event, we could also seek to have off-duty officers assisting. If it's something that's not of the city, we would have that director of that event, for example, a tournament, they would have the ability to seek out the PD for off-duty officers to assist with security. The next slide, slide 4. As mentioned earlier, this provides an opportunity to retain duties for staff that rather than being furloughed, they could have these tasks in hand. These duties would become a part of the employee's regular routine and task as we transition to normalcy at some point. The sample schedule that you see on the slide utilizes 1 employee to provide coverage for all of the parks in our system. 2 employees will be utilized over the weekend, as that's our heavier business operating days, where we would have 2 staff to do an earlier shift and a late day shift. These employees will be responsible for performing those duties along with the maintenance as mentioned earlier. And of course, in the event of an emergency, they would dial 911. Overall, despite the challenges that we have currently facing COVID-19, this is the proposal that we would like to seek support for to operate this service internally. The most noted benefit initially of this proposal keeps us from furloughing employees. This proposal initially generated as a short-term operational need, but eventually returning to normalcy and operations reverting back to near as possible. I'm confident that we'll be able to transition with our team and continue to provide a high level of service with these duties being considered as their regular routine. With the amount of agencies operating in this manner, we'll also have a large support system to assist us in the event we have any troubleshooting or kinks that we need to work out during that transition. Before we go into the other attachments, are there any questions at this point?
Ms. Hampton, you have, just want to remind us why we're even looking at this in the first place?
Well, one, we're looking at it for budget reasons. The second is we have a number of of our employees that are furloughed, with the parks being almost in a sense shut down or on limited capacity. Travis has informed me that we don't really have a need, particularly for the month of March and April. We had a very limited need for park security. So it prompted us to start looking at it from an overall basis and how we can look to start making some changes. Almost all of our outsourced contracted help has been eliminated for the upcoming budget year. And this is one of those services that we're evaluating as well. And we thought rather than continue with the contracted service, there might be an opportunity for us to bring some of our employees in-house and refine what we have at the same time.
Any questions? Mayor, do you have anything?
I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Landrum. I apologize. I didn't get a chance to call you back today. I was at the funeral.
No problem, ma'am.
The third party contracted company that we have, what is our contractual agreement that we currently have with them? Are we within that time frame? Is it kind of like month to month? I give you 30 days and or you give me 30 days and we can quit each other, or how does that, where is that? City manager or Ms. Littlefield or someone?
I think Travis can respond. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Mr. Landrum, I apologize. I didn't mean to overstep you.
Yes, ma'am. My apologies for failing to have that attached. We are in the first year of a 2-year agreement with Pearson Security at this time. There is verbiage within the contract to provide a notification in the event the third party or ourselves would like to change the current status of that contract. I want to say it's 30-day notification provided to the company, but as mentioned, we're in the first of a 2-year agreement with the company.
Okay, and so as long as we adhere to those, whatever that time frame is, we don't have any additional penalties to get us out of the contract.
To my understanding, that is correct, ma'am. Yes.
Okay, and then the other thing you talked about, an off-duty officer for someone if they, for example, wanted to have something in the park, and the police department would do off-duty officer. It's a fee of $40 an hour, correct?
Yes, ma'am. A perfect example of that is Sweet 16 parties, for example, at our facilities. Because of the nature of things that could happen at those type of events, it is the responsibility of the coordinator or the person reserving the facility to secure off-duty officers to oversee that event for the time that they have it. So that's an example that we would seek for any other potential renter or coordinator of an event to obtain off-duty officers for their event in the park or in the facility.
Okay, and then the last question, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for these lengthy questions. Is the vehicles that we provide to Pearson Security, would we contractually, are we obligated to provide them with those vehicles, or can we secure that, those back?
Well, those vehicles are city vehicles. That is part of the contract verbiage where they are provided vehicles from the city. So in the event we go in a different direction, we would just absorb those vehicles back into our fleet for the Parks Department.
Okay, so that inventory. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. I apologize for asking so many questions.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Those are great questions. They need to be answered. Any other council members, identify yourself before you ask your question.
Councilman Davis.
Yes, sir.
Councilman Davis.
Yes, sir, Mr. Councilman Davis. Go right ahead.
So what we are saying that all the furloughed people be taught how to be security, robocops or security officers, or what? All the laid off people, furloughed people.
Well, from my understanding and conversations with other agencies as well as with Pearson Security, there's no additional special training that would be needed or that would be provided, but we would have a revision to our current operations that would allow them to oversee the facilities, locking down the parks, the bathrooms, and operating in that manner.
So they supposed to be doing that now. I got a report from Mr. Pearson that rooms unlocked, trailers unlocked in his report. So they supposed to be doing that now, right?
Yes, sir, that is correct. Unfortunately, as we have transitioned from Courthouse Square and waiting for Club Drive to become available. That put us in a special circumstance where our facilities were getting renovated and we had the equipment out at Hunter Park. So those are some things that we'll need to hammer down on internally, but that will not be the case as we look to relocate to Club Drive once sanitation gets situated, and then we're able to go back into that facility.
That's all right now.
Thank you, Councilman Davis. Any other questions or comments from council?
Yes, Coach Watts, Coach Councilman Adams here. So, Mr. Landrum, does that mean then that there will be some operational changes and some job classification changes within the department in order to specify the employees that would then be having this type of job description? Is that something that they will come in as, if your program is adopted, they would come in as actually as security within the Parks and Rec department? How would that work? Or will this just be a part-time part of their job description?
Well, the positions that we're looking at that would assist us with providing the service, they actually would already have similar light duties already within their job description. For example, with our athletic staff, when they're overseeing tournaments and out at the ball fields, even during tournaments, they're already having in their duties to where they're supposed to maintain the parks, maintain the bathrooms, make sure they're cleaned during those tournaments. So we wouldn't necessarily have to go and add any additional duties. We wouldn't go and highlight them and say that they're security type task. It's just making sure that they are having that as a daily part of their routine to close the gates when they leave the parks, have the bathrooms locked. That would just be a part of their regular job description at this time.
But the security part of it, or the rules enforcement part of it, basically all they would do is make a phone call to 911 or to the police department.
Correct. In the same manner that when we're out in the field currently at this time, well, just to use as an example, before we allow dogs in our parks, if we saw a patron out with a dog in our park, then that staff would go and reiterate to them that dogs weren't allowed. The same way they would enforce that particular rule that we have in our parks, they would do the same in the future with this operation. If there's someone with loud music, if there's somebody being disorderly, they would have a certain level they would operate to. And then at that point, if it becomes where it seems dangerous or it requires emergency assistance, they would be positioned to call 911 for help.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it, Mr. Landrum. Thank you, Coach Watts. That's all I have.
Yes, sir, Councilman Adams. Mr. Landrum, just real quick, types of park security, that particular page, basically what we're describing here going forward for the time being is creating park monitors, looking at the description there, which are city and county employees, but not getting too far ahead. But at some point in time, I'm assuming that park rangers or park security, which has a little bit more authority to write citations, things like that, would be something that would be discussed and looked at down the road.
That is a consideration that could be discussed in the future. At this time, you are correct. Park monitors is the proposal that we would look at utilizing our in-house employees.
And looking at the description of park security, which is what we have now, and the park monitors is basically the same thing.
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Landrum. Any other questions or comments from council?
Yes, Chairman Watts, I have a question.
Yes, Dr. Berdanley, go right ahead.
Thank you. Looking at the schedule from 5 until 10, just have some concerns about after hours, after 11 o'clock p.m., vandalism, things of that nature. And also it's my understanding that Mr. Pearson does have arresting rights. Am I correct on that?
He does not have arresting rights per the verbiage in the contract that we currently have with them. And as far as their operating schedule, they currently shut down operations at midnight throughout the week. So the 11 o'clock, for example, is when our parks close, and they had an extra hour on the end just to round up their operations for each day. But they do not provide security services past midnight in their current agreement.
Okay, so I'm assuming that our police officers just do a ride through if they're in that zone after hours?
Yes, ma'am. They do have a zone patrol that encompasses our parks. Deputy Shaw had provided a call list that recognized that, but that file was a lot larger. We put a condensed call list, which is an attachment on, it's the last attachment in this agenda item as we speak. But their normal operations do encompass our city parks within their zone patrol.
Okay, and just the last question. So you stated that Mr. Pearson does not have arresting rights in our contract, but it's my understanding that he does have arresting rights under his certification.
If I could ask Ms. Littlefield to assist, I don't know what authority he has personally, but I know just based off our current agreement, I don't think they're in a position to enforce any of it.
I'm not aware that they're certified police officers, so I don't think they're able to arrest anyone. But you know, I could be wrong about that. They're not required to be certified police officers or certified law enforcement officers under your contract. Whether they are, in fact, I don't know.
Right. Mr. Pearson spoke with me. He did state that the two gentlemen that work with him do not have arresting rights, but he does, as long as he works for under a government. So if you could check that, that would be great.
I'll have the deputy chief look into that as well. I know she mentioned that he was a deputy 20 years ago, but from my understanding, and deputy chief, correct me if I'm wrong, even if he had those rights, he has not performed those duties for us as a park security individual.
Okay.
That is correct. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ms. Hampton. Thank you, Deputy Shaw. No other questions?
Thank you, Dr. Berdanley. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, I have another question, Councilman.
Yes, sir, Mr. Davis.
I always get a year report from Mr. Pearson, and I'd be startled when I see when there's a gun, there's a marijuana. I mean, if you get a year in support from Mr. Pearson, you would be surprised what goes on behind the scenes in the park. I don't know if y'all get a year in report. I always get a year, I request to get a year in report from Mr. Pearson.
I don't think, Councilman Davis, I don't think that is shared with either myself or you all as a council member, maybe individually receiving that report. What we go by is what's on the police roster. I think the deputy chief has a report, even though it's not attached, she can remind you of. I just want to let you all know so you have an understanding of where we are financially. Currently, right now, we spend $124,000 on Pearson security. We have decreased it in the budget that you just had a budget hearing for to $70,000 in anticipation that we would need to cut the budget to allow for some flexibility for us to manage our finances for the first half of the fiscal year. If you all choose to continue with Pearson security, and Mr. Pearson will be here on Monday to discuss his services in which he provides, we will have to increase what we presented to you by $70,000 to allow that contract to continue. And then those employees will stay on furlough for that remainder of the period.
Thank you, Ms. Hampton. And I just would like to point out that the reason that we're even having this discussion is for the very reasons that Ms. Hampton just stated. It's budgetary. I think that we can have the discussion as to what would be better to have in the future once we get through this time that we're in right now. I mean, the only reason we're discussing canceling the contract is for budgetary reasons. Later on down the line, with all this information that Mr. Landrum has gathered, we can have a good discussion on going forward with the type of security that we would want. Am I right in making that assessment, Ms. Hampton?
Yes, sir. And you all can decide how you want to provide the security for the future of the parks. I think what Mr. Landrum is suggesting to you all is that we're the outliers. No one provides security in a sense the way that we do. It doesn't necessarily mean that we can't, but he's giving you an example of what other jurisdictions and those who are around us and how they're providing that service. The service that you're receiving is not an inexpensive service. And if the budget continues to remain very narrow and tight, it's going to force us to have to make different decisions. So what he's presenting to you is what's around us. It's a way for us to do it in-house and not to increase services if we get to that point. But your next, your fiscal year budget that you were just having a hearing on does include a reduction in services for 6 months.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hampton. And I'm sure we'll be discussing this more when Mr. Pearson comes before us. And there's no doubt that he has provided a valuable service, but it comes down to dollars and cents as far as I'm concerned. Any other questions or comments?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yes,
Chairman.
Dr. Danley, go ahead.
Thank you. Chairman Watts, I just wanted to say, I do definitely understand dollars and cents. I'd like to propose that we think about at least keeping on Mr. Pearson as we transition staff into this position or the jobs. And the reason why I say is because I personally have not received any comments from Mr. Pearson unless it involves his contract. The comments that I do receive and I have received in the past are from constituents who go beyond calling and saying thank you for the services they provide, the times that someone has had a broken down car or someone's been left in the park. Not to say that our staff cannot do that, but I wouldn't want to switch it quickly just staff going immediately. I like to see some type of transition, but if we could propose just looking at Mr. Pearson, considering he does have the background, he's worked as a in the sheriff's department before.
Thank you. Thank you for those comments, Dr. Berdanley. I don't know if anybody realized it, but somebody was unmuted there. Mr. Adams, I see you unmute. Do you have a question or comment?
Yes, thank you, Coach. I think in the light of what Ms. Hampton has mentioned with the financial situation that we're facing and with our new budget only including potentially 6 months beginning possibly in January of 2021, the return of potentially Mr. Pearson's services if we do not go forward at present. This may force us to do a probationary period describing something like what Mr. Landrum has brought to us using staff. And unfortunately, that may be something that we have to look at, but I think it's a good time to try it so that we can prevent furloughs or return employees from furlough and see just how it works going forward for the first half of this coming fiscal year. Just a suggestion. Thank you. And please, I'm not in favor necessarily of canceling contracts, but as you've already mentioned, Coach Watts, we're in a situation where we are going to have to make some budgetary changes, and this may be a part of it. Thank you.
Well, I'd just like to add that when this was first brought up a month ago or whenever it was brought up, I had to give pause. I don't like the idea of anybody not being retained that works for us, whether they're contractors or they're city employees that are getting furloughed. But I think our first allegiance, if you will, should be to our employees that work directly for the city. But anyway, we could discuss this further. Anybody else have any questions?
I did, Mr. Chairman. I just had one comment. This is the mayor. For Mr. Landrum, your proposal is very well thought out, and we appreciate all the information that you provided to us about other jurisdictions in our surrounding area, metro area. But I did want to maybe make a recommendation for, we're doing park monitors now, the optics of what citizens see when they see the security Pearson Security, even though we're saying that it's the same thing that employees are already doing, and it may be a dog that doesn't have any teeth. But as far as arresting rights and all of that, but the optics of seeing someone in a uniform makes a difference, and it can be a deterrent to misbehaving. So maybe code compliance with the city or someone else can be on duty when we have these events, so that outside of seeing the City of Douglasville polo or t-shirt that says staff, that there's something that says security. And that security could be our code compliance rather than Pearson Security. That's all I had to say. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Any other comments or questions for Mr. Landrum?
If I could add, Coach Watts, just to highlight some of the additional attachments that you see, the two next to attachments are vehicle logs for the vehicles that are utilized by Park Security. And it gives you a snapshot of what has taken place in the last 10 days. We did a range from May 1st to May 10th. And what you will see is a heavy utilization of 2 vehicles, meaning 2 staff operating at that time. There is an operation in there that could have, a suggestion of a reduced schedule would have been beneficial in that scenario. What you'll see in some of the detail on particular days, the weekends will give you a broader range of what the operation looks like over a 12 to 16-hour shift. But you'll see scenarios where vehicles are extended in idling time or at one particular location. You'll be able to notice the addresses might throw you off a little bit, but when you're looking at it on the GPS specifically at that particular stop, it can highlight and let you know where it is. So you might have multiple addresses, for example, for Jesse Davis Park. We recognize in there that there were most frequently monitoring, of course, Jesse Davis Park and Hunter Park. There were periodic checks when you come to West Pines and Fowlerfield, and there were like minimal to zero operations as related to willing workers and Mill Village. So if you're able to get a chance to look at these attachments, just wanted to highlight that's the type of information we're able to pull via our GPS system. And Chelsea, if you could fast forward to the last attachment. This last attachment was provided from the police department. From January 1 to present date, this is a listing of calls that were assisted from the PD made by Park Security. There's a total of 19, if I counted correctly on here, and it gives you the nature of those calls that were taking place. So we did receive a report of his calls from last year, but it wasn't broken down to highlight what was assisted by the police department and what wasn't. But if you like that information, I could share that with you as well. But this was provided by Deputy Shaw regarding calls that they've assisted with for calendar year 2020 to current date.
Thank you, Mr. Landrum. I don't want to hurry us, but in the interest of time, because Mr. Landrum does have another report to give. And I'm assuming, Ms. Hampton, that we'll be able to further discuss this since Mr. Pearson will come before us, or do we need to get this all said tonight?
No, I would recommend you all hear what Mr. Pearson has to say, and just keep in mind, Travis briefly mentioned a reduced schedule. What's placed in your budget is $70,000 for FY 21. I say 6 months, but that can be broken down to a minimal schedule if that's what you all want to do. It's just a basic amount, so the contract can be rewritten if you want to continue those services. You know, I continue to say, just to remind you all that we do have those furloughed employees, and we have tried to minimize as best as possible all of our contracted services that are out there. We are, when Mr. Landrum presents to you parks, we'll talk about a minimal operation. So a lot of what we would have been able to do in the past, large events, those things will not be occurring. So that's the other thing to keep in mind as well, because of where we are with the COVID pandemic.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hampton. Anything else before Mr. Landrum finishes his report?
Yes, Chairman Watts, I just wanted to say thank you, Mr. Landrum, for the last report that you provided on the 911 calls. And I just want to say, moving forward, that any contracts that we have, this is good information to have when we have our quarterly reports,
Right.
because we want to just make sure that what we are paying out is matching what we see is being done. So this was a really good report. I just want to say thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Bordanley. Anybody else?
I got one more question. Have the graffiti been taken off the walls at the Jesse Davis Park?
The last graffiti that was known reported from Mr. Pearson has been removed, to my understanding.
I'll check. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Okay, Mr. Landrum, if there's no other questions or comments, Mr. Landrum, go ahead and proceed with the rest of your report.
Thank you, sir. So as discussed with the previous staff report, we're looking at operations and considerations for reopening our facilities. So as the city continues to operate and apply recommendations and considerations per Governor Kemp orders, the Parks Department is compiling a plan for our facilities, park amenities, and programs. The information shared tonight is only a proposal, and we will only proceed with what Mayor and Council supports. So this information we'll provide regarding our operations is an overall summary. And at the next round of council meetings, similar to what we had done at West Pines, we will have staff come in and present a more in-depth presentation regarding our programs, operations, from facilities to ball fields and our other park amenities. So the first area that we'll address is Hunter Park. After conversations with the health department, we're proposing reopening Hunter Park with a revised operation and limited access, proposing hopefully for Monday, May 18th. The biggest concern taken away from that conversation was the potential for park visitors to commingle with those coming in for testing. Currently, the testing schedule is Monday through Saturday, 8 a.m. to 12 noon, with no operations on Sunday. So with their concerns taken into consideration, we would propose a schedule for reopening Hunter Park to be Monday through Friday, starting at 1 p.m. This allows us an opportunity for the health department to complete their testing and leave the grounds for the remainder of the day. So for Monday through Saturday, starting at 1 and then operating until our regular closing. And then of course, operating on regular scheduled hours for Sunday. When we say limited access, what would we consider available at Hunter Park would be the front half of operations, as they continue to have their tent set up in the center of our ball field complex. We would not look to open up the ball fields in any capacity as long as they're continuing to have their shelter in place and testing out in that area. So when we say the front of the property, we're talking about the walking track, areas around the facility itself, and on the other entrance, as far back as the Honor Memorial Garden and the tennis courts. On the perimeter of the facility, that also would allow possible usage for the disc golf operations as well. So we wouldn't necessarily open up completely, but that would be a revised operation that would allow social distancing, utilizing our walking track, social distancing for those that might want to utilize the tennis courts, and then of course the social distancing that would take place when you're operating and performing on the disc golf at Hunter Park. The plans, again, as mentioned for the ball fields, that'll be presented in a future presentation. And of course, that only is if or when the testing at Hunter Park concludes for COVID-19. For the facilities, City Manager Hampton also shared insight on that. We would propose for the facilities to have a soft reopening come June 1. Regarding the Ike Owens and Hawthorne Center, that soft opening is proposed with a revised schedule for operations. The proposed operations in that sense would be 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. We would implement the signage throughout the facility, the social distancing floor indicators that will be placed throughout the facility. We currently already have hand sanitizers installed at the entrances of the facilities for the public. We would also have PPE for staff available and protective barriers installed, for example, around the receptionist areas, such as we have here at City Hall. The only consideration that we would have to take right now for the Hawthorne facility is that we're waiting for furniture to be delivered. And once that is delivered, then we would also implement and have the same protective shield there. But at this time, we would, of course, have that at Hunter Park as well. As it relates to cleaning practices, we would have an enhancement in our cleaning services with the in-house staff that is stored at those two facilities, where they would continuously disinfect during the operations that we're mentioning. And unless the state order changes, we would anticipate these planning operations for our rentals and reservations for larger groups to not go into consideration until July 1st. As it relates to the bathroom amenities in our playgrounds, we would suggest those stay closed at this current time and still follow with our peers throughout other agencies and per the orders from Governor Kemp. And for special events, as City Manager Hampton mentioned, those at this time would not take place, but the current one that we have on the table for discussion or a proposal regarding our July 4th fireworks, because of the concern with larger gatherings and risk of those ignoring the social distance requirements, we would like to propose that to be an event that we have on Labor Day versus then on July 4th. So at this time, if there's any questions about any particular facet for park operations, I can take them at this time.
Madam Mayor, do you have anything?
No, sir.
Okay, I'd like to open the floor to the rest of the council. Anybody have any questions or comments? Okay. So Mr. Landrum, that covered Hunter. Did you include, I guess you included Jesse Davis in that also?
Well, yes, sir. I apologize if it sounds as if I sped through it, but that facility is the one that we would currently have all of our programming take place right now. If it's supported to have the soft reopening that includes Ike Owings, then we would also include and implement the same practices there on June 1. As it relates to our other parks, they weren't mentioned in this presentation because we currently already have operations going on at those amenities, Fowler Field, Wheeling Workers, Jesse Davis. We have the signage visible within those parks. So those are currently already under operation. The only one currently impacted is Hunter Park. And of course, Mill Village is closed due to renovations.
Okay, thank you. Anybody questions, comments before we close this out? Thank you very much for that report. Very thorough, Mr. Landrum. Madam Mayor,
Yes,
that's
sir.
all I had under Parks, Recreation, Culture.
Thank you so much, Chairman Watts. Our staff report C is Councilmember Chair for Transportation, Dr. LaShawn Verdanley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
You're welcome.
Just one item is discussing regarding the request for speed humps for Charleston Crossing. Mr. Thompson.
Marcus Thompson, Project Manager, 6701 Church Street. Just wanted to bring it to you guys' attention, another request for speed humps for the Charleston Crossing community. They provided everything in the current speed hump policy and procedures. That includes the petitions, a formal letter describing the proposed system that they're looking to install, also the locations. Just wanted to get you guys' thoughts on how to proceed. My thought was to proceed with a traffic study, but that could be delayed due to the pandemic because we won't be able to get an accurate vehicle count And also, I want to bring to you guys' attention that the applicant will be present on the next round of meetings to answer any questions that you may have as well.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Just one question. I know that the around the area, cars do speed a lot, but I'd like to know the status of Hollis Street. I know there are now speed humps on Warren Drive. What's the status on Hollis Street?
So we're still waiting for that road to be resurfaced. After that's resurfaced, that's when we'll proceed with the installation of the speed humps.
Okay, and if there are speed humps that will be installed on Charleston Crossing, where would these funds come from?
I know we do have funds allocated for the next fiscal year. I have to get with Marcia and Karen to see what's in the budget if we would proceed at this time.
I would just add, Ms. Danley, that we have a very minimal amount in the budget for engineering services such as this. So if you were to approve, for instance, a Charleston Crossing, you wouldn't possibly be able to approve another community. So we just have one small amount of money, and I can get you those totals for Monday. But it may only include enough to do the study, but maybe not even enough to do the speed humps, depending upon how many they're requesting.
Right, and I think right now with the pandemic going on, I mean, I know cars speed in the area, but because of what's going on, I think it would be more appropriate. And I definitely want to hear from the residents or the person that's going to be speaking on Monday, but it would probably a little bit premature until we open back up, and I'm not sure when that's going to be. But I will yield my comments and start with Madam Mayor, and from our mayor, if anyone else has any comments, then we just let me know. Madam Mayor.
Thank you so much, Dr. Burdanley. Madam Chair, I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I did receive a telephone call from the HOA president for Charlton Crossing. It's one of my daughter's friends, her dad, and they have 75 signatures on this petition. And they know that resources is a concern, and they may be willing to pay for the speed humps themselves, the residents, if we provide the green light for them to have them. But that's just, someone talking, not everyone, but that was some of the concerns and comments that I received from the HOA president. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Anyone else have any comments? Questions?
Madam Chair, this is Chris Watts. It's like this particular subdivision, of course, is in my ward. I know it's a cut through from Chapel Hill Road for some folks. I've cut through a few times myself. I know the traffic study might reveal a lot. I guess my main comment would be that what I read in their letter was that they expected the city to pay for the whole thing, is what I saw in the letter. Now that may be what they're hoping for. I know we've talked about this before with the previous request. I worry that they're not cheap, and I worry about the precedent we set. It seems to me a number of years ago there was a proposal in our HOA, and we were told at the time that the HOA had to pay for the speed humps. I don't know if that policy has changed over time, but that was one of the reasons why they didn't go forward with it, is because it was expensive and HOA was going to have to pay for it. But that's all I had to comment on, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Okay, if not, then I will close comments and questions. So there are no other items under transportation, Madam Mayor.
Thank you so much, Ms. Chair.
Yes, ma'am.
Madam Chair, we will move on. Are there any for item 20 comments from citizens and delegates? Has anyone sustained our marathon meeting and want to have comments?
Madam Mayor, this is Chelsea Jackson, Assistant City Manager. There are no citizens or delegates wishing to speak at this time.
Okay, great. Any other business to come before council this evening? If not, then this meeting is adjourned. Thank you for your time. Have a good evening.
Good night, everyone.
Good night,
Good night.
all.
Good night.
Have a great weekend.
Thank you. You all
Good
too.
night.
Yeah, see you Monday.